All right. I believe we are live and not in person, but on the internet in multiple formats. Good evening and welcome everyone. Joining us this evening in our webinar in our December 2021 meeting of the Ballard District Council. Appreciate everyone being here, both as panelists and as guests and viewers and neighbors. First, just want to take care of a little basic business. This is the December meeting of the Ballard District Council. We're not meeting in person, but wherever we're coming to you from, we're coming to you sort of from Ballard, and the Ballard District Council wants to respectfully acknowledge that the greater Ballard area is on the land of the ancestral lands of the coastal Salish people. We honor and with gratitude we honor these lands and waters which have been cared for by Duwamish, Suquamish, and Muckleshoot people past and present, and we want to acknowledge that, even though it's only a tiny stride in terms of overcoming the history that we all have behind us. Want to thank very much all the folks who are here tonight. I'm excited about our agenda and our different pieces of it. The first 30 minutes of our program, we're going to hear from a number of folks who you see on the screen here. We're going to talk about the redevelopment plans and the future, the exciting future of St. Luke's Episcopal Church in downtown Ballard, right across the street from Ballard Commons and next to the library on the other side of the street. And then if things roll according to time, we'll be joined at 7:30 by Marc Dones, who is the new CEO, I guess not so new, but still 6-7 months into their position as the CEO of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. And we're going to talk to Marc about all kinds of things that they're doing at the Regional Homelessness Authority to try and solve the giant crisis of homelessness in Seattle and in Ballard and in King County more broadly. I'm going to first just introduce Reverend Britt Olson, who thankfully is back in Ballard and back in very busy status with us. And then I'll let her basically hand off to others who are going to present to us about St. Luke's. And I'm going to just turn off cameras for several of you who are just watching here on the panel. Britt, thank you for being here.
It's great to be here. Great to be back in Ballard. I'm Britt Olson. I am the priest at St. Luke's Episcopal Church. I'm in my 7th year. Sometimes they call me the Vicar of Ballard, which I love. And part of the time since 2017, our congregation, including 2 members who are also Ballard residents who are on this webinar today, Bill Hoey and Barbara Wilson, who are both part of our property stewardship team. Our team has been working since 2017 to find a way forward to build a more beloved, diverse, inclusive community in our neighborhood that really creates a sacred space for our congregation, as well as affordable family housing for our neighbors who are either being priced out or who are in danger of losing their housing because they are essential workers that don't make the average median income for our increasingly wealthy city. And we have done a process that has brought us to the place where we get to introduce to you our partners in this work and to hear from them today on some proposed ideas for how it might work to do this. So I'm going to let you know that you'll be hearing first from John Marasco, who is with Security Properties. This is the market rate developer that we are partnering with to bring space for the church as well as mixed income housing. Also, Allison Loring is here from Bridge Housing, and this is the affordable housing provider that we have chosen to move forward with over 80 units of affordable family housing for people who make 30 to 60% of the average median income. And then you're really going to hear a lot from Brian O'Reilly, our super talented architect, who will be this project, we hope, will have architecture and construction and shared amenities, or not amenities, but shared development that you'll hear about soon. So we're thrilled to be at this position at this time. It's taken quite a bit of time, a lot of thought. We took about 1.5 years to do a vision and mission engagement process at the beginning of this, and it's our dream and it is coming to fruition. And I'll turn it over to John.
Thanks, Britt. My name's John Morosco, and I manage the new development activities for Security Properties. Security Properties is a local developer, owner, and operator of primarily multifamily housing. Some of you might know we did On the Park, which is the development just to the west of the Ballard Commons Park that brought the new QFC to Ballard back in, I think we delivered that back in 2007. We've had an opportunity to team up here with Allison and Bridge Housing to develop a concept where we provide both market rate housing, workforce housing that would be included within the market rate project, and then an affordable component where the residents will be all at or below 60% of the area median that Allison's group Bridge Housing is going to manage. We've got a single team that we're bringing to this development for the architecture and the construction of the project of the development. There'll be a single common podium base, and on top of that base, there will be 2 buildings. One that's predominantly oriented to 58th, and then the market rate building that takes up the western frontage along 22nd. Brian will share the concept that we've currently have for developing the property. We've been scheduled for an EDG on January 3rd, and we not only are excited to share our concept for the development of the project, but ideally, we're looking forward to your support for the project at that hearing. I'd like to turn things over to Allison now.
Thanks, John. I want to thank you all for letting us come and speak with you today. And John gave you the general overview of the project by way of the synergy that we see with the market rate and the affordable in St. Luke's all working together. I think one of the things, particularly from my standpoint, that's exciting is the team dynamics and working together and working with a neighborhood. Bridge, unfortunately, I can't say is a local developer in Seattle. We are fairly new. I opened the office here about 5.5 years ago. I myself have been working in development for over 20 years in Seattle and was part of a local firm, and really appreciated the perspective of Bridge Housing because we've been in business for about 35 years. And I think one of the strengths of the company is the partnerships. And before we actually applied to Britt and the church for the compete for the project, we had been talking to John, and really it's a strong team, which is really lovely. And we really want to understand how this fits well into the community, because all development is complicated and challenging. But the more we get to work together, the more we hear from individuals what are the drivers locally, the better it is. And of course, it's nice that John has a project already in the neighborhood and is well vested along with St. Luke's. Thank you. And now the fun part, which is turning it over to Brian so we can give you the actual pretty visuals that actually help you walk through sort of what the concepts are that we've been working with. And I know from my standpoint, it's always easier to talk to the drawings and
It's certainly always easier to know what you mean when we are looking at a picture. So yeah. Thanks for bringing them.
Yes, our pleasure. And I'm Brian O'Reilly. I'm with Via, a Perkins Eastman studio. We've been in Seattle for almost 25 years now, and I've been working throughout the city doing multifamily projects. And in fact, some folks on the call may be familiar with the Ballard Yards project on Market Street. That's a Via project, and we're excited to bring it to the neighborhood. and excited to bring the St. Luke's project here to fruition. As John said, this is a really great partnership between Security Properties and Bridge Housing, and most importantly, St. Luke's, who is not just a tenant, they're an essential part of the development team, and they're going to remain the landowner of the site. And it is one team. It's one design team, one contractor, and so that means a cleaner design review process, entitlement process, faster construction, simplified construction, all of which makes the project not only more feasible for Britt and John and Allison, but also makes it less impactful to the neighborhood. So jumping into it, for folks that are not fully familiar with the site that we're referring to, we're directly east of Ballard Commons Park. And the general site organization that we have going on here is the market rate building, John pointed out, is kind of on the western edge of the site. The St. Luke's church space will be on the southwest corner, opposite the library, opposite the park, kind of building upon the civic core of Ballard. And the affordable housing building will be along 58th Street. One of the exciting opportunities we have on this site, for those of you that are familiar with it, there's some really beautiful, mature, existing trees on the site. And so we have the opportunity to preserve many of them. In particular, we're looking at preserving about 10 trees along the north side of the property line, 3 of which are exceptional trees. One of which I think Britt would like to be an exceptional tree, which is this beautiful larch right here. And we're also looking at preserving an exceptional tree on the affordable portion of the site as well. And one of the things that's important to mention, and I think that we're really hopeful to get your support in, is that we'll need to ask for some development standard departures in order to preserve these trees. And we'll go into those in more detail in a moment. One other thing to mention is that shared podium that the 2 buildings are sitting on top of, that's shared parking beneath the project. And so we have one parking access for the project that's right here off of 57th. So again, that preservation of the trees, it does provide this really beautiful open space that is a nice way to address the somewhat lower scale development that's directly to the north of the site. This is that area where the trees are being preserved. And where we're asking for departures, we think it actually improves the civic space that is Ballard Commons Park. We're asking for a little bit of additional height as well as some departures from upper level setbacks, but the result is this really nice bookending of the park that is very much in scale with the Ballard on the Park project that John mentioned earlier, that's directly to the west. So here's just a sampling of some of the projects that Security Properties and Bridge Housing have completed. To give you a sense of the quality, it's a proven team that does really great work. Via as well in Seattle has done numerous projects, both market rate and affordable housing. And as I mentioned, also projects in Ballard itself. So without further ado, we're going to talk about some of the massing options. When we go to early design guidance, which is on January 3rd, we'll need to show them 3 different massing options. One needs to be code compliant. There needs to be a second option, and then there's our preferred option. So we'll go through them in that order really quickly. Oops, sorry about that. And this one here is the code compliant option. One of the development standards in this area requires this stepped kind of layer cake massing. And that's what you see here along the north and west facades. In this case, it's kind of a donut shape. And then the affordable housing component provides a unified street wall with some bay windows along 58th. The second massing option, we take a more simplified approach to the market rate portion that does away with those the tiered massing, but steps back the entire building away from the property line. And then the affordable massing provides this street level courtyard to bring more activation to the ground plane. And then our preferred option, and this is where we're taking steps to preserve those trees along the north side. It provides this more articulated face that looks toward the commons, and then a courtyard that faces toward the south for better solar access and to provide some more massing relief as we move toward the library to the south. The affordable portion is very similar to the previous option we looked at, but in this case, it's 1 story higher. And there's some benefits to that we'll talk about in a bit. So just a few views of the project. We're looking down 58th. This is the affordable project with the street level courtyard. As we look from a bird's eye view, you can see the series of outdoor spaces that kind of increases in size as we move toward Ballard Commons. You can see the articulation of the longer face along that north side in the market rate building. Again, that courtyard and the affordable. And then here, this is a great view that shows the church volume on 22nd and 57th here. The purple is representing that church volume. You can also see how the church is being carved away at the corner to create some semi-public outdoor space that the church will be able to open and close and allow access when in the daylight hours and when the time is right. When we look at the facade from the commons, you can see that we've added quite a bit of articulation in the form of bay windows and balconies and clear stories. One of the big things that we wanted to do is to really get as many eyes on the commons as possible to provide as much activation to that outdoor space as we could from the upper levels. At the lower levels, we have more active street uses. So that includes the church and that includes the residential lobby, which will have kind of the more public and public facing spaces located there. So whenever we go to an early design guidance meeting, we do like to bring a few evocative images. We call them character sketches. So at early design guidance, it really is intended to be about massing and not about the specifics of materials or fenestration. However, we do like to take some time to demonstrate what it might look like to provide something for people to respond to and to give early feedback on. And so that's what you're seeing here. This is a view of the affordable building. Again, that street-facing courtyard provides this really wonderful relief from the street, a place that would the design guidelines for Ballard kind of describe as eddies along these east-west streets. Pulling back to the corner of 22nd here and 58th, you can see the setback along the north side for the exceptional trees, as well as the affordable building further down the way. And you can see the way that the west-facing facade might be articulated in a way that provides that activation and life facing the park, as well as these street level uses that will provide some additional eyes on the street. And then here's a look at that corner with St. Luke's in it here. We intend to provide this. This is actually quite a grand space. It's almost 30 feet to the top of this cornice line right here. You can see the scale of the people in there. It really is trying to reinforce the idea of this as a civic destination in this civic core of Ballard. And as well as showing this open corner that provides the ability to bring people into that church space in the outdoors before they enter the church itself. So as I mentioned previously, we are excited to preserve these 10 trees along the north side, as well as this exceptional tree on the affordable portion of the site. But we do need your support in getting some development standard departures. And so I want to jump to those really quick. There are a couple, there's one small departure for the affordable building with respect to bay width on the south facade that I won't spend a whole lot of time on. Suffice it to say that the bay width is really just trying to match the width of the living spaces on the interior as opposed to being constrained to the 10 feet that's in the development standards.
So
With the
bay width just gets 2.5 times wider as a projection out into the blue is additional request. Is that right?
Yeah, and actually this we're in the process of updating this, and this is actually going to become 3 separate bays and be about 2 feet wider each.
And is any of that window?
Oh yes, yeah. I mean,
Mostly
that would be
window,
almost that would be primarily window, I think.
Right. I just want to make sure because it kind of represents that, but yep.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. Good clarification. So where the real meat of the departures are with what we need to do in order to keep these trees. And so the way the development code is written is they encourage you to ask for departures in order to retain exceptional trees. In this case, we're asking for 2. And the first one that we're looking at here is departures from the upper level setbacks. In this zone, we're required to have a setback of 10 feet from the street lot line above 45 feet, and then 15 feet from the street lot line above 65 feet. And that's what you saw in that code compliant option where the building kind of stepped in as it moved up. Now, in order to carve out this really significant portion of our building, it's a 33-foot setback in order to preserve those trees. We're asking to put some of that area back into the building along the west facade, and the west facade only. And again, we think that is a really nice way to provide the relief in the building where it makes sense, where we're facing lower rise development, where having this planted and treed buffer provides this nice transition from our building to the neighborhood to the north. Whereas on the west facade, we're creating one of the walls to the urban room that is the Ballard Commons Park, and one that's in scale with that space. As I mentioned before, it feels very much of a scale with the project directly to the east across the park, or sorry, to the west across the park. And so that's one of the benefits that we see in preserving these trees and moving that mass to that location.
In your schematic there, it actually looks considerably smaller, I might argue, than the one to the west. Is it, or is that just an error or
I think it's just
scale?
the grade is going up, and so it looks bigger.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they're essentially the same height. I think there is some stepping happening here, but basically there versus theirs is about the same height.
Similar height, okay.
Yeah, and you can see this is that area that we're carving away, and this is the area we're asking to kind of put back in. So we're by no means exceeding the amount of area we might have had otherwise. In fact, we have a 5.25 FAR limit, and this option is well below that at just about 5 FAR. There's one other departure, which is for structure height. Again, there's a specific exception in the code when you preserve exceptional trees that you can request an additional 10 feet in height. And we are asking for that. It's actually 10 feet for the NC zone, and we only ask for 5 feet for the MR zone, since there's actually we get 5 feet extra in the MR zone in any case. But again, not exceeding the amount of development area that we would have if we did not preserve the trees. So those are the two big departures, and like John said, we would really love your support in pursuing those. So I think that's kind of a wrap. I think we're always eager to get feedback. I believe we have a website that folks can provide feedback at. Is that right, John?
We do.
Yeah. And we can share that around. But at this point, I think that's the end of our presentation.
Excellent.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I will definitely open up for some questions. I'm just trying to figure out how to turn off your screen share. Maybe you can do that.
I can help you with that. There you go.
Great, and then we'll include everybody here. A really interesting project. I guess, we had last month, we had folks from OPC, Office of Planning and Community Development, and specifically David Goldberg talked a lot about the development of the kind of downtown Ballard design standards and guidelines. And a lot of the push in that process was to kind of take away some of the canyon effect that you see like behind my head here on 57th. So just wondering kind of the reaction to that. I mean, is the notion that you aren't creating that because of the proximity to the park, or I think that's likely to be people's biggest concerns with changing the massing away from some setbacks.
I think you really nailed it, which is that the canyon effect kind of requires it on both sides to really make it feel that way. And where we have development on both sides of the site, we're setting back pretty dramatically. So we have that setback on the north for the trees, as well as the street level courtyard for the affordable project. And then we, on the south side facing the library, we have the south facing courtyard. So the building is broken into pretty dramatically into two separate masses. And so where it makes sense to have maybe a bit more mass actually is the commons, in that it creates and starts to shape the urban room of the commons there.
Angie, I don't want to just hog the question answers.
We've had a couple questions come in. Is that okay to pop up with those?
Sure.
One of them is, one of our board members is a Rotary member and also volunteer at Edible Hope. So this question might be more for Britt. But the question, several people have actually sent this in wondering what will happen with the daily feeding program as this development starts to happen.
Yes, thanks for asking that, John. You're such a wonderful volunteer, and we always miss you. So as we were studying and designing for this and dreaming for this, we had our advisory board for Edible Hope had made the determination that we could best serve people in another location, where people are more likely to have access to other services, or to be in an area where folks would more naturally congregate. And so we knew we were going to be moving the serving of and providing sustenance for people off-site, and we began to explore the various possibilities. So we have been in that process and will continue to be in that process. It's possible we will be doing a food truck. It's possible we will be utilizing other space in a different part of Ballard, which is less impactful on people who live in the area. So that's been our process, and we will still have a kitchen in the very multi-purpose space that will be St. Luke's, because we hope that we will continue to be a place for people to gather from our community and our neighborhood, particularly as we have residents in affordable housing and market rate housing, and want to build that community and that relationship and offer our space to be used by community groups and for meetings and for concerts, etc. So that is the plan, and that's a great question. Our mission is to feed people in body, mind, and spirit. So we'll always be feeding people one way or another, but our edible hope meals will be offsite.
Great. And then another kind of similar question is, someone is wondering, will there be any commercial uses or services on site, or other than, the church and the housing and the parking garage? Are there other types of uses that people should be aware of?
So we will not have retail. What we will have is we will have space that say, Ballard Alliance wants to have an event and they need space. We will be able to provide space because our space that we're designing, our architect for the St. Luke's interior space is Olson, and they have good experience in designing multi-purpose space that is really filled with light and life and warmth that could be used for a variety of purposes. And we're excited to provide that. We feel that's something that's really missing in Ballard, is large enough space for people to gather. And it will have a kitchen and also a gathering area. We also will have the opportunity to partner both with Bridge Housing and other nonprofits to provide some of these opportunities for possibly, we have no idea exactly what we could do, but possibly we've been looking into affordable preschool or after school programs for the residents of this family housing. As many of you know, if you try to find childcare that's affordable in Ballard, it's just really difficult. And most organizations can't afford the real estate in Ballard. But if we have our space, we can partner with other organizations to offer that space for really important services and programs that will really benefit the community.
Thank you. And then this is more of an architecture question. Jody is wondering, how will the sunlight getting to the park be changed with the requested modifications? And I guess I would just add to that, we have the spray park in the one corner. So I guess there would be a chance, especially in the morning, that sunlight, the taller you go, it might impact the sunshine on that corner that's kitty corner from the library.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we will have sun studies that will be in that early design guidance package that demonstrate this. It really is in the morning hours at later in the year that it starts to shade the park. In the summertime, the sun angle is so shallow that it is really not an issue. But it does start to hit the north east corner of southeast corner.
Southeast, yeah.
In the morning and that later time of the year.
This time of year.
Yeah.
Let's see. We had one other
Angie,
question.
while you're looking at that, I'm just gonna turn on Dan Strauss's camera.
Okay.
Councilmember Strauss is with us and wanted to, I think, say something or perhaps make.
Great. One other quick comment I'll make is just that I think it's really nice, the preservation of the trees on that 58th Street side, because that's the neighborhood greenway, which is a real popular bicycling pedestrian route also. So I thought that was a nice aspect in the design. And then let's see, I do have one last question here coming in. What about the Venturi effects through the park? I don't know that term. If the height is symmetric to the opposite west structure, is that a term that you're familiar with?
Yes.
Is this a wind?
This is a wind
Yeah.
question.
Wind issue.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, and I can answer that. And I think one of the great benefits we have of both of these buildings is that their facades are highly articulated, lots of ins and outs, balconies sticking out. And the more textured a facade is, especially to that degree, that is going to really limit the amount of shearing wind effects that are coming down the facade. So like an office tower in downtown that has, a really smooth glass skin, that's going to just shoot down the facade and cause trouble potentially. A facade like these, it's generally not a big concern.
And then one last question that came in was, I think that there might be a little bit of confusion over the term affordable housing, which I think was actually represented pretty clearly in this meeting tonight, but just to give a chance to clarify that one more time, that this will not be a housing first project that's being built in terms of the type of housing that's being provided. Britt, do you want to speak to that a little bit? That people are kind of wondering, I guess the question is, will people be moving directly from the park into these apartments, or what type of populations will be living in the apartments?
Sure, I'm happy to take that question.
Okay.
So the project is a family affordable project. So we will have all units below 60% of median income, but typically people coming directly off the street out of homelessness can't transition directly into more of a typical apartment structure. There's transitional, or you've heard, there's a lot of programs out there right now. I think it sounds like you'll be talking about one later today. So from that standpoint, we would have our own wait list. So people would be interested in, we make sure that Seattle Housing Authority, that local housing authorities know there's affordable housing. We make sure to get our leasing information out early so that people are aware, and we'll talk to, and part of the actually outreaching to all of the organizations in Ballard too is allowing folks to know when the buildings are anticipated to be done and when those units will be available.
Allison, can I just add to that?
Certainly.
We had a real vision in our church, knowing how many of our young parishioners can't afford to stay in Ballard if they get married or have children. We have a lot of folks who are essential workers who work as substitute teachers and in other roles. And we've just realized that and we have seniors who are being priced out of the neighborhood. And I know Councilmember Strauss wants to talk about this, but our community is better when there are 1, 2, and 3 bedroom homes for people who meet those criteria. And there hasn't been a project like that in Ballard for, decades yet. And there have been a lot of housing, not a lot, but there've been some housing first developments, that one additional one that's going in, but this is not that. This is affordable family housing to allow for the diversity of our neighborhood to stay, kind of fit with the traditional Ballard that some of us remember, which was kind of somewhere around working class-ish. So we really would like that to be part of this, as much a part of this development as possible. Really, homes for people to stay in, especially multi-generation homes. There's a lot of folks that.
Yeah, we really appreciate hearing all that, Reverend. All those things are things we're hearing constantly at Ballard District Council as concerns and goals, and what we really hear people want to see happen again. And it's just one look at market rates in our neighborhoods, it makes it pretty obvious that you're exactly right. We're working on being 10 minutes late on our agenda, but I'm pleased and delighted to have Councilmember Dan Strauss with us, as he often does join us. Dan, you wanted to say something, but I'm going to cut you off if you go on like a legislator.
Yes, sir. Well noted. I just wanted to take this moment to thank everyone who's presenting today, because I remember going back over a year and a half ago, working with Reverend Olson on speeding up this project. I think had we not connected with Enterprise Services and others, we would not be here at this time today. We would be here at some point in the future, absolutely. Just wanting to recognize that it's been a great partnership and great to work with you, John, as well. And really calling out and highlighting the family affordable housing. We need more 2 and 3 bedroom units that families can have. And I think a lot of people react at times when they hear the word affordable housing. What we need to keep centered in mind is these are the people who are working at our coffee shops, working in our restaurants, working at our daycares, working at our post offices. These are everyday people who used to be able to afford to live in Ballard and might not anymore. So just thank you to everyone for getting this project going. And I know that we are waiting anxiously for tomorrow's NOFA Affordable Housing Dollars announcement. It's a competitive process, and I was just really lucky, and I'm grateful to have gotten to work with Reverend Olson to make sure that they had a very competitive application. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember. Keep that working waterfront going with some housing for people. That's great. Appreciate it. Folks, I'm just gonna ask you to go ahead and mute and turn off your camera as we make a little rotation in the agenda. Reverend Olson, Brian, John, and Allison, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Hope you'll be able to stay around and enjoy the rest of this meeting. And we'll just pivot to the second half of our agenda, which is Marc Dones and the King County Regional Housing Authority. Marc, very nice to meet you. Thank you for being here.
No worries. It's Homelessness Authority, not Housing Authority. Different
Did
name.
I say Housing Authority? I absolutely know the difference. But thinking about affordable housing, got the word housing, I guess, in my mouth. So, but thank you very much for being here. I'm going to basically turn the floor over to you for a little bit, just to talk about what you've been doing, where things are going, give us a little bit of a flavor, however you want to characterize it, and then we can do some conversation and question and answers.
Sure. And good to see you, Councilmember. I will say I unfortunately do have a hard stop tonight. My days are long. So
that I do believe.
So for folks who haven't had a chance to meet me, and certainly the folks watching, my name is Marc Dones. I am use they them pronouns. I'm the new CEO at the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, not to be confused with our other KCRHAs that already exist.
I may have just confused you for, yes.
The key is the R. You got, if you can get the case,
oh, I know, yeah,
that's it's a pleasure to be with you all tonight. I think I take a lot of joy in having the opportunity in my role to do events that are focused on connecting directly with community. I hope one day to be able to do them in person again. So I will just speak very briefly to just for symmetry, like, the role of the authority, where we're at in stand up, and a little bit about where we're headed. So for folks who didn't follow the ins and outs of this saga very closely. So in 2018, I actually was asked, I was leading a separate team at the time, but I was asked to come in and conduct an audit of the King County response to homelessness and identify opportunities for improvement. The team that I was working with released that report in December of 2018. I think we were the 5th or 6th report of that nature. While I on my good days think I'm pretty smart, there wasn't a whole lot new to report on at that time. And so, one of the significant findings of every previous report, and then, my team's, was that the system wasn't a system, right? It was too fragmented, and responsibilities were too diffusely scattered across a number of different city and county agencies and offices to actually really drive towards the execution of any plan, right? And that one of the things that we saw was a culture of indecisiveness. But when you peeled the onion on that, what you actually found is no one actually was sufficiently empowered to say yes or no. So like, you know, I think we in the community experienced like, where is the answer to this question, right? But like, frankly, many of the people in those jobs also felt like it was difficult to get an answer to a question. In December, Mayor Durkin and Executive Constantine accepted that report and pledged to, you know, launch a regional authority. My team stayed in place through most of 2019, doing a lot of work with people experiencing homelessness, frontline staff at provider agencies, and other community members to understand, you know, what should the fundamentals of a new regional organization be, right? Like if we're creating a new branch of government, that doesn't happen that often. And so really wanted to get a lot of good, solid community input about, you know, what should this look like? How will we know if it works? How will we know if it doesn't work, right? And, you know, what are the things that we need to hold folks accountable to?
Well, and only 40 municipalities to work with within that county region, right? I mean, it's a big cabal of folks you've got to put together there. So appreciate the notion of trying to, you know, do the outreach and the engagement to make it happen.
No worries. I think, you know, I feel very strongly about democracy, I guess. It's like a weird thing that I've sort of hung my career on. And I do think, right, that like, you know, we have a responsibility, right? It's one of the reasons why I do really value taking this time to connect with community directly, is because I think that, like, you know, even though our organization and our agency is focused specifically on folks experiencing homelessness, we have this broader responsibility to the community fabric as a part of government. So the legislation that created the authority was passed in 2019 in December. Someone was supposed to be in my job in like February, March of 2020. Instead, there was a pandemic. At the time, to be honest, I said that I was not interested in taking the job. I was running a different organization. I went on my way. In December of 2020, I was concerned for a number of reasons that this work that the community had put so much effort into defining wasn't like going to launch successfully, right? And so threw my name in the hat specifically to see if I could be of some assistance. I was confirmed in March of this year. I started April 26th and was a staff of one for a couple of weeks. And then we were a staff of 3 for a couple of months. And then really beginning in August, had enough of the internal systems in place to begin really ramping. And so as of this week, I think we're at about 27 people as of today, on our way to, you know, in the mid 60s probably for total staffing array. So that's a little bit of the history of where we are coming from.
People who have paid attention, Mark, to the Ballard District Council and our regular kind of participants definitely know a good bit of that.
Okay, great.
When we last really had a detailed conversation, it was with Councilmember Lewis at the city and Councilmember Cole Wells from the county, right, kind of on the order of last, I guess it was February. And so there was a lot of excitement about what was then your sort of impending arrival, and a belief that things were really going to start to turn around the corner with the RHA and getting the work program going.
Yeah, I think, you know, the thing that I think is important is, and I'm sure you all hear this a lot, but just, you know, the impacts of the pandemic on both my own organization, Stand Up, but then also on just homelessness broadly have been like, can't actually be overstated, right? And so, you know, I think that there have been some significant delays that like we're not going to be anything other than delays. I think that, you know, so I think what folks are probably most interested in is sort of where we're headed, and some of this I think you know, people may have seen in the paper or in other venues. But we're very focused, particularly for our Seattle Metro. So when we look at the county, we look at the county in subregions. We have 6 subregions. Seattle Metro is one of them. But we look at those subregions and try to have a really solid understanding. Stop. Sorry, my dog.
It's all right.
Don't do that.
It's Zoom reality these days. Everyone should be used to it by now. It's not a problem.
We are really focused on optimal resource deployment when we don't have enough resources, right? And what that means in out of that jargon is like, when you can't be everywhere at once doing everything at full force, you just have to make choices, right? And what I am committed to is not going around and telling everyone that like we can do all the things with what we've got. Like we just can't, right? And I don't want to be, frankly, a person who it's my personal credibility, right? Like I don't want to go around telling you all that like things are possible when I actually don't see a pathway to them from my office. And
Well,
so
more importantly than your personal credibility, it's the office's credibility and the agency's sort of focus, right? And I certainly appreciate what you're saying. I mean, those of us who worked for decades in government appreciate how often we've been hearing, do more with less, or do more with little more, or some version of that same cliche. And it doesn't ring true, and it just doesn't serve the taxpayer who's not going to believe you from the start.
Right. And I think, it is time for us to, I think as a community to really start having like the nuanced conversations about housing and homelessness, which are not like there's no magic wand solution, like there's no silver bullet, like it's not that like there are heroes and villains. It's just like a lot of work to do and decades of underfunding that needs to be accounted for inside any analysis about how to move forward. And so we're really keen on place-based work. And having essentially like theaters of operation where we are driving towards dramatic reductions in the number of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness in those theaters. But they will have defined boundary, and we will be very clear that like, if we're talking about something that's not in a theater of operation, then our expectation will be that we'll continue to provide services there, right? I want to be really clear about that. We're not just gonna like roll like, just, okay, no outreach, no conversation, no nothing. But the expectation for where we have a really lasered in focus will be that we hit essentially functional zero for those sort of subsystems, basically, right? And in other places, we won't tell you that is coming. Our goal, though, is to be able to do that, sort of place by place, and to we do it in one place, we create a functional zero subsystem, and then we pick up that infrastructure. There's some leave behind to maintain that, right? But we pick up that sort of operations theater and move it to the next place on down the lane, so to speak.
Right.
So that's going to be our approach. I think that inside all of that,
clarifying questions about that.
Sure.
I just want to make sure that I understand, as well as others who are at the meeting are following, what functional zero really means. I think I understand. We're not talking about sort of net zero growth necessarily of the problem, but we're talking about sort of getting to some near zero population of homeless individuals in whatever theater, to use your word. Is that correct, or is that not correct? How do you define functional zero in this setting here?
It's a little bit of both, right? So at its core, functional zero is more of a net zero growth term, right? Where it's like you're saying that the outflow and the inflow are the same, right? What we are thinking when we talk about hitting functional zero is we are coupling that sense of dramatic reduction and then holding the reduction, right? So like when we talk about the 800-ish folks who are living unsheltered in and around the downtown corridor, right? When we say we want to hit functional zero for that area, we're not saying, so, the 5 people who come in every day, we should have 5 people exit, and that counts as functional zero for that area. We're saying we need to house and provide, shelter and other, whatever the necessary supports are for the vast majority of that 800 people, right? And then we need to hit functional zero, where if 5 more people show up, again, we are creating an exit path for another 5.
We're not growing back
Exactly
where we were when we had 800 or more.
Exactly.
I think
But the decline is important. And I want to be really clear about that, because that's the part that like we need to have our like when we are having our nuanced conversations, right? Like in every single jurisdiction or neighborhood that we might apply this approach, we are first having to evaluate who is experiencing unsheltered homelessness in that neighborhood right now, and then plot the course for seeing a dramatic reduction in that number of people. And that is when I say we don't have the resources, right? It is the ability to do that at scale everywhere at once that is not currently possible.
No, not without a lot more than 60 of you and a lot more money than you've been able to cabal in a budget so far.
Yeah.
But people in Ballard are going to, really appreciate, I think, the poignance of what you're saying specifically this week, because we've just seen a big change right in our downtown Ballard core with the the third attempt in a few years now to kind of go to that massive decline in the homeless population in that encampment, and then go back towards a process that hopefully will be more of a functional zero kind of outgo process.
Right. And I think that the work that was done at Ballard Commons this time actually typifies some of what we will be deploying as our approaches, right? Of like, rather than, these very quick operations, right? Like we have also sort of outlined in some of our preliminary planning, right? That like the path to success here is through deep and meaningful engagement that sometimes is months long, so that you can get to know people, understand their needs, build the case plans, and then do the resource matching so that they actually have pathways into the right stuff, right?
Right.
As opposed to, certainly things that we've seen, frankly, when we move too quickly, which is, people just wind up 2 blocks down.
Right. Or just very generalized approaches that don't really appreciate individual needs. I mean, I think something we've been talking about and trying to sort of, I guess, make a plea for a long time in Ballard and different community organizations here is for more of a by name list, kind of a case management strategy. We've had some real success with that briefly through the Ballard Alliance and the work that Mike Stewart and some of the different folks in his staff doing more social work and outreach to individuals, and collaborating with folks at St. Luke's and at the Urban Rest Stop and some of the other. I mean, we're in a neighborhood that's in a fortunate position to have a lot of support services to try and help folks in varying needs. And yet we haven't really gotten to that list decline, scratching names off a list, folks who are getting into either high acuity, low acuity, long-term permanent solutions,
Yep. And it is that, like, it is the combination, the opportunity we see is the combination of that place-based work coupled with really knowing people and having that granular level of data, right? So like, broadly speaking, we are driving county-wide towards the creation and maintenance of a by name list infrastructure, right? Like where, it is my goal that really by the end of 2022, we are in a much better place with a more centralized capacity on any given day for me to walk into my office and be like, who needs help? Where are they? What is our plan for that? Right? Like that's the kind of thing that I should just be able to ask and get an answer to, And like, we're not there right now, and it's
No.
going to take some significant infrastructure development to do that, some reconfiguring of how the system operates. But like we have seen in communities across the country, right, that like that approach to that, what is really sort of situational emergency response kind of data is the best way to approach homelessness and ending homelessness. And I think that, that's the other thing that I would say is that like, what you'll see from us is that we will be in the posture of an emergency response agency and not necessarily some of the other functions of government, right? Like, we consider homelessness to be endable. We also consider it to be a crisis, right? And so what you all will experience from us is much more of a boots on the ground mentality, both from how we work as agency staff, right? In terms of like connecting, like I'm doing outreach tomorrow, right? Like our teams actually do that work in order to understand what the situations are that they are trying to manage the resources around, right?
From more of a strict learning and kind of identifying the process approach, or is the long-term operational endeavor to lie with you? I think a lot of folks don't really understand, and I guess I'm one of them, who, where Seattle jurisdiction's responsibilities turn over to the regional homelessness authorities jurisdictions.
Yeah.
I mean, duties operationally.
Our goal, I think, in that boots on the ground approach is like, we're not seeking to become outreach workers. It is about having that actual situational understanding of like what's happening, so that like when I say something to a reach team member, for example, right, that like what I'm saying is grounded in what they see, as opposed to like what I'm making up on a whiteboard, right?
Understanding the crisis and where we're at in different programmatic attempts to deal with it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
From a perspective of Brinks, stop. Sorry.
When the thing's over, we'll get on this. We'll go on the same computer and we'll both bring our dogs. The dogs can entertain each other.
From a just like, what is the authority's oversight role? I will say, so we have span of control from outreach all the way through the services dollars that will attach to permanent supportive housing. So it really is the entirety of that crisis response ecosystem. So that's the day centers, all of the shelters, the outreach contracts, the hygiene centers, like all of those things will sit with us.
Excellent. Angie Gerald, our vice president, turned her camera on. I assume that's because she's giving me the subtle hint that there's other people who want to sort of participate in the dialogue with you beyond me. But I don't, before we go to just sort of more of a kind of straightforward kind of Q&A, fire and answer kind of thing, just want to give you a chance, if you want to keep making further remarks, if you had something else you really wanted to just cover or touch on.
I don't have anything specific. I was listening a little bit to the conversation you were having as I joined, and one of the things that I would lift up, just for context, right, is like, when we talk about affordable housing, we often do it in, I think, these the area median income segmentations is the most common. It's the conversation you were just having, right? I think, we need to start having that conversation in numbers, because the area median income in Seattle is actually remarkably high. And like, and that's not a bad thing from an economic perspective, but it means that when we say things like, it's, X percent of area median income, area median income is around $80,000 a year. And so when we start having this conversation about like, well, what does that look like at 30%, for example, or 15% or 12%, right? Those numbers are actually high when we think about like, then what what job you might have, right? So like, if I just do a straight blunt force, like what is the 30% of $80,000, right? That gets me to about $24,000 a year, right? That's, I mean, like, that is I mean, to the point around like, these are our baristas, these are our, like you, at this point, you can be at 30% your median income and be like close to full-time employed at like the movie theater, right? So when I just think like adding real numbers to that conversation is really helpful because it helps ensure that we are very clear about how unaffordable housing has
Absolutely.
become.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I mean, you look at the huge wealth disparity, well, internationally, but right here in Seattle is one of the, archetypes of that problem. And until people start to realize, there are a huge number of people working full time who are living in poverty because they're just not the ones living in the right part of that economy you just referenced.
Yeah.
Bringing that median up, then, it's just very difficult.
Yep.
And it goes a long way to explain why there's so many folks falling off the line who are, end up living in a camper down the street from you.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody really wanted that, but there it is.
Mm-hmm. So I don't have anything else to say.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate the comments. I'll let Angie kind of weigh in with some of what we've been hearing from other participants and members of the community.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate you being here this evening. We've had over the last year or so, there's kind of a set of questions that keep coming up, and I'm very glad to be able to ask them to you tonight. So I'll start with some of those. But one of those would be, what is the appropriate way for concerned people to communicate with the new Regional Homelessness Authority? Is there a role for neighborhoods or an expectation that community would engage directly with the authority, or these boots on the ground? Staff members that you're speaking of, will we meet people? How can just the public at large, the community in Ballard, engage?
I mean, folks are more than welcome to just email our staff directly. We have a general email box that is like actually monitored, like someone will write you back. People write me handwritten letters sometimes, which I think is very charming. You're welcome to do that if that strikes your fancy. We also, again, I take our job of connecting with community very seriously. And in part, that's because this issue has become so polarized and toxic. And I think that the only way that it becomes better is by talking to each other, right? And so I never skip these things. I never, it may take a long time to schedule them because my schedule is horrible, but I always do the community events because we have to, right? And that is inclusive of I've said repeatedly, right? I will come sit in people's living rooms, right? Like COVID safe. And we can just have the conversation. We have taken people up on offers to host small gatherings with their neighbors. All of those things are things that we will do. I think that, the goal for us is both to listen and also to share correct information in some instances. In terms of input into our planning processes and that kind of work. So we, in the first half of 22, will be constructing a lot of our broad total system rebid work that's going to go into what the 23 system looks like. And there will be a number of community workshop opportunities for that. And those will all be posted. And some of them will be oriented towards people experiencing homelessness. Some of them will be oriented towards, frontline staff or proprietor agencies, and some will be oriented towards the broader community. So, pick the one that is, your, one of those for you, and please come. We, for those kinds of things, use a lot of design research methodology. And so it's a lot of okay, what do you all think of this? And then Post-it notes and let's theme these things and how do you want to talk about these things? But we use that way of soliciting input pretty consistently. That's just been a method that I've used for a long time. I find it to be very effective at getting a lot of input really rapidly that can be granular, right? So it's not just big themes, but you really can get into what the specifics are of what people think. And then the other thing that I would say is, we are still not totally staffed, right? So my goal is that there is one day some really consistent avenues for communication at the staff level where people are able to say this is the person who, my community has a relationship over at the authority because they're responsible for helping my community, right?
Mhm.
We're just not at that staffing level yet. And so know that is a thing I would like to get to.
Well, I'm going to jump in and just say it's this thing that has to happen in order to keep you alive, Mark. I mean, it is no way you're going to make it in government agency of the size and scope that yours has for many years if you can't find the way to really find deputies and folks who can carry off a bunch of the work that you're doing a remarkable job through your energy and charisma carrying off right now.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So that's interesting. So is there within the model then of the Regional Homelessness Authority, the idea of having, a point person for a neighborhood or a geographic area, or is that something that hasn't really been fleshed out yet? Because it's not something that's happened at the city level in any of, this type of response over the last 5 years or so. So there's a lot of community knowledge, a lot of connections, information, concerns, ideas that just don't have anywhere to really funnel to.
Mm-hmm. So we've got there are two existing avenues for that, and again, hopefully one day there will be more robust ones. One is, so every subregion has a dedicated planner assigned to it, right? So there is a Seattle Metro planner. Her name is Sparrow. She's lovely. She's been doing this work for 20 years. She's really knowledgeable. Sparrow is like sort of the broad Seattle Metro person, right? When we start talking about that more laser-like sort of focus on specific neighborhoods and that functional zero, we also have a person who we've hired who will be joining in January, named Heidi, and her role is she's the director of what's called our Neighborhood Zero Initiative, which is that project of functional zero neighborhood by neighborhood, right? So Heidi's job, in addition to managing those literal sort of deployments and managing the by name lists and the driving towards getting people housed, will also be to connect with the communities that are part of whatever the current operation is, right? So there is both the ongoing conversation that all of Seattle will have with Sparrow and hopefully more people, right? But certainly now Sparrow is on staff and available. And then there is the specific we are doing an exercise here that is designed to radically reduce the number of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness, and then hold that. And that while that is happening, then that conversation would be, more led by Heidi. And obviously, right, there's overlap in those roles depending on, right? So, they are both great people to talk to. And then I think, depending again on sort of what else the thing is, we do have, obviously as with any organization, we have people who lead on certain bodies of work. And so say you want to have a conversation that is, really about what's the thing? Coordinated entry, right? You have got some really good thoughts about coordinated entry because you've seen some things that don't work, right? There are people to talk to specifically about that, right? And so it really is, if you don't know who to reach out to, the best thing I would say is do send an email to that general info inbox. And the person who manages it, Catherine, will triage it to who the right staffer on our
And the
team
notion is that you'd have a program subject matter expert on staff who would sort of guide or service point to that.
Mm-hmm. Or if it's a specific place-based thing, then it would go to the person who's responsible for that place.
And how about when it gets to the point of having concerns about specific people? Seattle is really in this, era of reinventing public safety and public health to a large extent. So we used to have like a community police team officer who was assigned to Ballard. Some people knew who he was, some people didn't. Like, they've always been spread too thin. We've never really had, good, beat cops walking around that we're familiar with. But that was at least one, if you saw someone who is repetitively, harassing a business or just having a really hard week in whatever different ways, not a 911 call, but there was someone you could contact who knew who the service providers were, who could help connect dots and make some connections. We don't really have anyone in that role right now. And I think
Right,
people
he
aren't
really
clear,
served that
is that
liaison
something
role.
that the new authority will be doing? Is that something the city will be doing? But there's just so much in all of our daily lives that we see and hear and want to connect dots in a healthy way.
That's something you would reach out to us about.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, all the outreach contracts will be going to us.
Okay.
I am, in addition to again, just my doing outreach and our teams doing outreach so we can understand what's happening, right? That then feeds into a lot of then real-time communication with the outreach providers, right? So and again, it is oriented so that when I call them, I know what is happening, right? As opposed to being 50,000 feet in the air and being I have no idea what is actually going on here, right? But I have a lot of really, really direct conversations with outreach staff where I'll say hey, I got a call about a concern about this. Can you swing by and see, yada, 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 right? Do you have the bandwidth to look into so we are already doing some of that, and that will continue to beef up as we move forward. The thing that I think is really important, though, is also to note, particularly because I know Reach does a lot of work in your neighborhood, right?
They do, but nobody knows who they are. I mean, there's no uniform, and we don't get a chance to meet those workers. So a very small number of,
sort of stealthy
store owners or people who are connected, to a church or to Ballard Alliance, or, a certain connected subset would know who they are. But people in general would love to be able to call a caseworker who knows the neighborhood and knows people, or call some point person who can help connect those dots.
Even identify them.
Yeah, but
we can definitely think about a way. I'm hearing the thing that you're naming. I don't have an immediate solution for it, but I can think about
we know we have the Reach program and the LEAD program, and we know all these the Union Gospel Mission or different organizations might be active in the neighborhood. As well as very, Ballard-based ones. But nobody really knows how to channel really relevant information to them.
Right. Yeah. I do think that one of the things that so I hear that. I think that it is an interesting thing that I think there is likely a clear solution to, that I just got to figure out from a structural perspective, and then we can loop back with you and be here's how you would do this. The thing that I would lift up, which is I think broadly, some of our general community conversation right now is that for a lot of folks who have intense behavioral health needs, we don't have any place for them to go. Right. So I again, it's my job to not bullshit you on that. Right.
Well, but even if we don't have anywhere for them to go, maybe we have, people who can help de-escalate or support, or at least, provide some connections that are healthy, or context for people impacted.
Only sometimes. And I just want to be really honest, because the kind of significant behavioral health stuff that I know, I also see it, there is a man in my neighborhood, for example, who has pretty severe schizophrenia, and he has a routine where he roams through the neighborhood shouting this really repetitive. It can be very disturbing if you are not me with a degree in those things and are I know how to manage it.
We are very well familiar with those behaviors in Ballard. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just leveling. I am not saying, I'm not trying to poo-poo your concerns or not acknowledge them. What I'm saying is I see that man every day, and I in the system that I currently oversee don't have a resource for him.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't have any place for him to go. And so even if we were to dispatch like one of the, and again, this particular thing, I also want to be really clear, because we do have some mental health first responder resources, but those don't actually sit with us. But so even if those first responders were to go out, they could, to your point, do a de-escalation, but without any specific path to an inside space or something that is going to hold that de-escalation. The likelihood is that within 3 to 4 hours, we'll be back at peak.
Yeah, there's clearly no therapeutic avenue out of that. That's just triaging a really potentially dangerous crisis, but then just putting it back out there till it erupts as a potentially secondary dangerous crisis.
Right.
We get that, you know.
And I like, again, that's not good. Like, and I'm not defensive about it. I'm not defending the current state of affairs. I just want us all to be having the conversation about what the baseline reality is today, and then like agree collectively that that can't continue.
So I think probably people in Ballard and probably a lot of neighborhoods across King County are most concerned about those most kind of strident problems, or maybe most critical problems, I guess, that individuals are having. But curious, sort of, how does the strategy start to fall out then in terms of getting some of those resources to put some of those folks, or folks who are, you know, maybe slightly higher functioning? How is it going to lay out in terms of the strategy to start creating those places so you do have a different answer in the next, let's say, 3 or 4 years rather than 1 year?
Honestly, it has to be within 1 year. So let's start there. Like, the reality is, and I take this very seriously, folks who don't know me and haven't heard me say this, like, so, you know, I have significant mental health issues. Like, I've lived with them my whole life. I've been forcibly institutionalized twice. Like, that was probably a good thing, frankly. And I've been fine for many years because I take, you know, an important pill twice a day. And like, so, but like, this is really important to me because there's very little, like, when I think about the differences between my life and that man in my neighborhood, right? Like, that's a fork in the road moment, right? And I had resources and access, and he did not. And now we are living very different realities. And the mortality rate for someone who is living with schizophrenia and is unsheltered is around 35. Like, yeah. So like, this is actually, when I say we need to baseline that we don't have a resource for those folks and that it is unacceptable, I really mean that. So what we have proposed is the creation and expansion of what we're calling high acuity shelter, which is shelter that has staff attached to it at the medical level that would allow us to provide folks with the kind of care that they actually need. Currently, if you have any of those kinds of significant behavioral health concerns, even if you find your way into shelter, the likelihood is that you will be back out pretty quick because the shelter can't manage your behaviors. Again, not the shelter provider is not at fault here, and the person who is experiencing psychosis is not at fault. It's a mismatch, right? And so what we have proposed is shelter that has that kind of capacity, that has psychiatric nurse practitioners and, you know, some family medicine practitioners attached, right? And that it could provide actual medical stabilization so that then people could make a meaningful choice about where they wanted to go next. That would be their choice, right? It's not our job to choose for them. So like, they get to stabilize and they're like, and here's where I want to go.
That would include things like co-occurring disorders and people with big substance problems, that kind of thing.
Yes. Like, you know, so for example, right, like right now, if you are, so meth utilization is up. But when you talk to people, some of the reasons why they start using meth are often because they're afraid, they are experiencing homelessness, they're afraid, and they need to stay up all night. That is actually like a significant number of the pathways into meth utilization that I hear, right? Of like, I was just really scared. And so, you know, like, I was afraid that I was going to get jumped or my things were going to get stolen. And so I needed something to stay up all night, right? And then later on, that becomes a full-blown substance use issue, right? we don't have a lot, again, we just don't have options for people who have that issue and are saying, I mean, I had a person say to me, this was maybe 6-8 weeks ago, but I was, I called Health One to essentially run a code on someone who was, I couldn't tell if they were just decompensated or if they were actively overdosing, but like it had exceeded my street capacity, right? And so I was like,
be alarming. I agree for sure.
Right. So like, and again, I just have training in these things, to be clear. But someone else came up to me and said, hey, did you call for the code on this person? Like, can I get one? Right. And I was like, that's not how it works. But like, they were like, hey, I've been using this meth. I think I want to stop using meth and I don't have anywhere inside to be in case I start detoxing. Right. So it's a person who's like saying to me, I'm trying to make this attempt to get off meth. And the best way I can think of being inside while that happens is for someone to have me sent to a hospital. Like that's where we're at right now in terms of resource scarcity. And so we know that in the system, people experiencing homelessness know that. And so the reality is that we all have to say, again, that's an unacceptable reality. And we need to create and staff these kinds of places. I've recently made a hire, or I'm about to make a hire. It's posted. I'm in the final countdown for a health-focused position that's really going to work on designing and standing up all this infrastructure and providing a new level of clinical oversight to the homelessness system because of these kinds of concerns.
Wow. I'm clearly aware of the 5 minutes that remain on your clock ticking.
Yeah. Can I put out a question that comes up a lot?
I just want to make sure, I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to also make sure that we at least spend some of the 5 minutes asking Mark what they feel about the agency's role with cars. I mean, campers in mobile homes. We have some of the biggest car camping problems in the city here in Ballard.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would love to hear you answer that in the context of the whole region, because it often feels like what happens in Seattle is really unique to Seattle. Not that people aren't relying on cars and vehicles for shelter, in many places across the nation, but the ways that Seattle responds seems really out of sync in many ways.
People experience homelessness with vehicles all over the county. It is not uncommon. It is, in fact, it's pretty common. We have not, I think, made the level of investment necessary. I'm heartened, frankly, by the council action this year to do a pretty substantial investment, CM Strauss, into safe parking and RV, programming support. I think the thing that has gotten in the way historically is those programs have actually been underfunded. And then when they don't do well, there's this like, oh, well, they don't work, right? And in reality, they didn't get the full breadth of scope and support that they need. So, there are a number of safe parking programs that, are operant all over the county. Most of them are run by religious institutions. Some of them have, a fair number of barriers, others don't, et cetera. What we think is true is that, when you think about people who are experiencing homelessness with a vehicle, we need to make sure that we're accounting for cars and RVs in sort of separate schematics. They often have very different profiles. We also have a vehicle residency working group that has been meeting now for, I think, 4 weeks, maybe 5. And is comprised of folks who do outreach to folks who are living in vehicles of other service providers and people who live in vehicles, right? Like it's our commitment to always include people with lived experience. And so they're really working on honing our vehicle residency strategy and building that strategy in that working group and making a series of, sort of recommendations, but they're recommendations to us. So like, we will action them.
So a few years ago, there was an RV lot in Ballard, a pilot program that ran for a while. And I think it was actually criticized and closed for being too expensive in the long run for the results, that came out of it. So I don't know that it could be said that it was underfunded, but that it didn't.
Well, it could certainly be said, though, that it was under implemented, maybe is the right word. I mean, when folks basically had to show up as volunteers to provide clean drinking water in containers.
No, I don't know if that was
there certainly were
anyway.
some problems with like your basic water, sewer, garbage coming to that place. I know from my experience at the utility. And so it's like you got to get some basics figured out, I think.
I guess what I'm curious to know is now there's a whole new group studying this, coming from a neighborhood that has a lot of vehicle residents and some lessons learned. How can the Ballard community kind of know what's going on, or how, learn from the one that was in Ballard? I had heard that it was the insurance costs that were one of the things that really did it in, that they had to have 24-hour security, and that the insurance, was much more expensive than they expected. But was that documented? Did we learn from that? Like, how it just feels like we keep kind of starting over with new efforts and new groups, and it doesn't always connect back to what's already been done. And we're kind of just sitting on the sidelines as a community, trying to figure out, like, are they going to get it right this time? Do we,
I would characterize this as different, noticeably, in the sense that, like, we don't need to start from scratch. Like, there's nothing wrong with safe lot programs, right? Like, so I will say safe parking for cars and safe parking for RVs vary in program cost almost exponentially, right? And like that's just the math there, right? So like RV safe parking is a different order of magnitude at just the cost level before you do any services. The thing that I think is a fair characterization of many of the safe parking programs is that they don't have a whole lot of service connection, right? And so I think that is often what the criticism has been, particularly of RV safe parking, right? It has been very expensive. And then because there's not actually a program attached to it that's helping to house people, then the question becomes like, well, what's the outcome of this expensive investment? Mm-hmm. What we are asking our vehicle residency working group is not to reinvent safe parking. We're asking them to write the manuals for the programming, right? Mm-hmm. And to say, that's where there hasn't been a whole lot of meaningful, from my perspective, looking at the national literature, right? Like there's no evaluated best practice program models mm-hmm. for doing the housing connection stuff for people who are living particularly in RVs in this instance. So that I think is the thing that I would say there. In terms of, again, the opportunity for folks from Ballard to provide feedback, like I'm happy to come back with, frankly, at that juncture, it would be, I think, to Brent's point, another staff member, but with the outputs, right, of that working group conversation, and say, here's what we came up with. Is there anything that y'all think, you have heard that you're curious about, right? The thing that I will always offer up, right, is like, and this I think is important just to norm, right? We may come and say like, hey, what else do you think? And someone may say something and we may be like, oh, that's interesting, but it's not actually a great idea, right? Like, and like, I just want to be really upfront about how that might be the conversation sometimes, and not in a snarky way, but in a like, here are the reasons why that doesn't work. And here's, why, here's where that has been attempted in Denver and it failed. And, so we're not going to replicate, blah, 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 blah.
Amen to that. I think we're a constituency that's really going to be responsive to that. I think, that one of the things that undoubtedly probably brought you here is the reality that the broad constituency here wants to solve this problem in a healthy and really compassionate way. And that's one of those places where if we're telling people the honest truth about what can and can't be done with what we have, it's going to go a lot further.
Yes.
Well, I've got my eye on the clock, and I know that we're running you past. We have so many more questions. We're just really, really grateful that you're here tonight. And I do hope that there's a lot more chances, especially at the neighborhood, at the community level, to really have dialogue, ask questions, contribute to ideas.
Yeah, I would suggest a couple things before you respond, Mark. One is that we would try and forward some questions over to your office so you can get back to some folks if they have specific things they want to know. I'm sure you're happy to do that.
Yeah.
And the second is just, I'm really hoping this is the beginning of one of your myriad warm relationships with big communities in the county, and that we're going to see you back here again and keep working with you in this way and take more of your time to talk about it.
Yes, you have that's an easy commitment. Like, the only thing that I always caveat is like my schedule is a nightmare, so I won't probably be back as frequently as I'd like, but I'll be back, and
Understood.
I will be back frequently, right? And again, like, if you have other questions and you want to send them over to our team, please do. We're happy to respond in writing to anything that I wasn't able to answer tonight. And then if other things come up, just reach out. Like, I think like we do want to be in a posture of relationship and not just these transactional sort of like, well, oh, come on, I came and I answered your questions. What more do you want? Right. Like we very much understand that, like, again, how we depolarize this conversation, how we get to having a healthy problem solving oriented dialogue is by keeping communication open, non-transactional, and focused on solutions.
I appreciate that. It's become harder, sadly, in the last 5 years to do that in neighborhoods in Seattle, because so much of the current and former mayoral administrations have really downplayed the role of the Department of Neighborhoods and kind of excised some of the interaction between a lot of the neighborhoods, especially those of us who find ourselves living in historically more enfranchised and white neighborhoods, right? So it's like, well, we don't really have a voice. It's like, well, no, we all still want to participate, and there's lots of people of color with lots of different economic backgrounds in our neighborhood too. So we're really looking to kind of continue that opportunity to have an interaction and bring community voice to it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you
Really
so much.
appreciate you being here. Have a lovely holiday season.
Thanks, you too.
Take
Bye,
some time
everybody.
for yourself. We'll see you again. And I'll say thanks to everyone who's been here from the Ballard District Council Board. Appreciate all your help. Britt Olson is still here, popping back on. Thank you very much, Britt, for bringing what is clearly a gigantic new view of what's going to be at St. Luke's Episcopal Church. It's time for big changes in downtown Ballard, where you are. Wish you all good luck with that. Was it January 3rd? Is that the date, that early in the year?
Yeah, January 3rd is when the city will take, I can't remember exactly what the name of the department is. We'll take early design
commission, I believe. Yeah.
Early design guidance. And that's where community participation happens, as Brian said. And if you would like to be part of that, we have someone who is coordinating. If you want to write a letter, you can do that. If you want to do a Zoom, Angie is great at participating in community meetings, but we'll give you the instructions on how to sign up to do that. And you can contact me directly to do that at St. Luke's, and I would let you lead you to Kim Michaela, who coordinates all that for this team, and we would really appreciate that.
Yeah, we will absolutely let our members know that how to do that, and I will try to make it myself if I can. And it's an important thing, I think, to participate in the aesthetics of design in the buildings that are going to be with us for, well, in our case, the rest of our lives, for sure.
Yeah, so. It's 100-year ground lease. Brent, we love yours, Angie's, and anyone's participation in that from the district council.
Super. Well, thanks to you and the whole team of Kim's for being here and presenting. Thanks again to Mark, who ran off to give his dog a walk, I think. And because we appreciate their being here too. And thanks to everyone who tuned in. We're going to be back again in January. The second Wednesday is?
It is the 12th.
The 12th of January, we'll be back with the first 2022 meeting of the Ballard District Council. It's looking like Omicron on TV all a long time, unfortunately, though many of us in Ballard are already boosted and trying to be as immune to all these terrible coronavirus as we can. So I'm still kind of the faith that we're going to be able to get back in person in a more kind of normal communitarian kind of way here coming in 2022. But we'll be back on TV with you in January, focusing on a conversation about demographics in Ballard and changing demographics in Ballard. Undoubtedly, you've seen some of the news about census and was it the 2020 census, I guess we're now getting results from. So Diana Conzaneri, the demographer with Office of Planning and Community Development at Seattle, is going to join us, and we're going to talk about the census and about demographics in Ballard, how Ballard has changed, and answer as many of your questions you in Ballard organizations and neighborhoods as possible. And you want to hit on the end of that, Angie?
No, that sounds great.
Super. I want to thank everybody along the theme of our homelessness conversation. Just as we did last year, want to remind everyone, if you have the opportunity to be generous and compassionate with your wealth this winter, as well as your time, because people really do need it and appreciate it. Everybody who got moved out of Ballard Commons yesterday didn't necessarily move into a warm, shiny condo for the holidays. So keep helping folks, keep taking care of each other, keep taking care of your neighbors. We appreciate you. Happy holidays. And I guess we'll see you in the new year.